You caught your reflection in the hallway mirror and your hair looked flat again, pressed to your scalp, thinner on top than you remember it being. You patted it down and let out that same small sigh you've been letting out for years. Here's what's actually happening. The way fine hair has been styled for decades is the exact thing making it look thinner. Not your age, not your genes. The instructions themselves, rules handed down that nobody ever questioned. Here's what's really at stake. Fine hair is a measurement, not a curse. A single strand is simply thinner than a coarse one, and that has nothing to do with how much hair you actually have. Whether that hair reads as full or thin depends almost entirely on 5 habits most of us picked up decades ago and never once reconsidered. And the last one, the technique professional stylists used before product companies rewrote the whole conversation, might be the single biggest change in this entire video. None of this requires money, a shorter cut you don't want, or a single new product. Stay with me, because by the end of this you'll never look at your hairbrush or your hairdryer the same way again. Welcome to Timeless Tresses, where we stop obeying rules nobody ever explained. If that's your kind of channel, hit subscribe. Let's get into it. Rule 1. When hair gets thin, cut it short. Let's start with the biggest one, the rule that's done more damage to fine hair over 60 than anything else, and the one almost every woman believes without question. I understand why this one feels like settled wisdom. Every stylist says it, every friend repeats it, and most of us have heard it said directly to our face in the chair, cape around the neck, nodding along. Here's the mechanism, and the science behind it is simple. A single fine strand is thinner than a coarse one. That's the entire definition, nothing to do with how many hairs you actually have. What creates the appearance of fullness is something stylists call optical density. The shadow hair casts over itself and over the scalp. More shadow reads as more hair. Less shadow reads as thinning. A blunt, weighty edge holds that shadow. A wispy, over-thinned edge doesn't. When fine hair is cut very short and heavily layered, especially close on top and at the crown, you strip away exactly the length that would normally cast that shadow, and light hits the scalp directly instead. It isn't that you have less hair. It's that you've arranged it to reveal your scalp instead of covering it. The fix is keeping more length than you've been told to. Chin length, collarbone length, or longer, with a blunt or near-blunt bottom edge instead of feathery, razored ends that shred already fine strands into transparency at exactly the point the eye lands. Do it today. At your next cut, ask specifically for a strong, blunt line with only 2 soft layers around the face, instead of heavy all-over layering, and watch what that single change does to how much hair you appear to have before you even leave the chair. It's worth knowing where this particular rule actually came from, because it wasn't always considered wisdom. Go back to the 1950s and 60s, the era of the weekly salon appointment, the set, the roller, the sit-under dryer. Shorter, sculpted styles needed constant professional upkeep, which kept the appointment book full. Women's magazines built an entire ladder of age-appropriate length around the same idea, until a certain birthday was expected to bring you to a short, tidy style. The rule was never really about volume. It was about a woman quietly stepping back and taking up less space. Once you see that a rule like this was invented for a reason that had nothing to do with actually flattering you, it becomes a lot easier to set it down. Rule 2. Rich, heavy conditioner. For dry, aging hair. This one did its damage quietly, in the shower, and there's a good chance you're still doing it tonight without a second thought. I understand exactly why this rule feels responsible. Hair does change with age, strands can feel drier, and reaching for something described as nourishing seems like the obvious, caring response. Here's the mechanism. Fine hair has less surface area and less internal structure to actually absorb heavy moisture, so those rich formulas don't sink in. They sit on top, layer after layer, wash after wash, until the roots can't lift at all. That's called product buildup, and on fine hair, it's one of the most common causes of a flat, scalp-showing look that gets blamed on age instead of on the bottle sitting in the shower. The fix costs nothing but a change of habit. Stop applying conditioner to the roots and crown entirely. Condition only from the ears down, where hair is genuinely older and drier. Switch from a heavy moisturizing shampoo to a lightweight volumizing one, and look for the word protein on the label rather than oil. Protein swells the strand slightly and helps it hold shape, while oil flattens it. Once a week, a clarifying wash strips the buildup that's been quietly burying your volume. Do it today. Skip conditioner at your roots on your very next wash, and notice whether your hair lifts differently once it's dry. Many women describe their hair feeling startlingly light at first, almost squeaky, right before it dries and lifts at the root in a way it hadn't in years. It's worth sitting with that reaction for a moment, because the instinct in that first squeaky clean feeling is usually to panic and assume something's been stripped away. What's actually happened is that years of buildup have finally been removed, and the lightness you're feeling is what your hair was always capable of, underneath everything that had been layered onto it. Rule 3. Dry your hair the way it falls. This is the one that costs absolutely nothing to fix, and it's genuinely the most powerful volume technique that uses nothing but your own two hands. I understand why smoothing hair down and drying it flat feels like the neat choice, the one that reads as put together. It's also exactly what trains your hair to lie in the one direction that hides its own fullness. Here's the mechanism. Volume doesn't come from the length of the hair. It comes from the angle at the root. A strand leaving the scalp at a low, flat angle lies down and shows scalp. The same strand lifted to leave the scalp at a high angle stands up and casts a shadow, reading as twice as full. Nothing about the hair itself changes, only the angle. The fix is 3 free habits. Flip your head upside down and dry roughly with your fingers, moving against the direction hair normally falls, lifting every root away from the scalp before it sets. When you flip back up, don't brush it flat. Just shape it with your fingers. Move your part an inch or more from wherever it sat for decades, since hair has memorized how to collapse along that exact line, and forcing it to cross over in a new direction makes it stand up at the root simply because it doesn't know how to lie down that way. And use the Cool Shot button on your dryer. Heat makes hair moldable. Cool sets the shape in place. So lifting a section at the root and blasting it with cool airlocks that lift in for hours. Do it today. Try just the upside-down drying trick tonight, and don't brush it flat once you flip back up. Shape it with your fingers instead, and notice the height before you even reach for any product. Rule 4. Chase high shine. This one disguises itself as something good. It looks like health. I understand the appeal completely. Every advertisement for hair care shows glass-like shine as the goal, and it's genuinely hard to unlearn that association after decades of seeing it marketed that way. Here's the mechanism, and it connects directly back to optical density from earlier. A smooth, shiny surface reflects light in one direction, in a bright line. On fine hair pulled flat and glossy, that reflection runs straight down the head and lights up the scalp along the part and crown, announcing every thin spot rather than hiding it. A matte or softly textured surface scatters light in many directions instead, creating the appearance of more mass and more shadow, hiding the scalp instead of spotlighting it. The very thing so many of us chase, glass-like shine, is the thing quietly making fine hair look thinner. The fix is adding texture, not grease. A light dusting of dry shampoo, even on freshly washed hair, adds grip and a soft matte finish that makes fine hair behave like it has more body, swelling the space between strands and lifting the root. Do it today. Apply a small amount of dry shampoo at your roots right now, even if your hair is clean, purely for the texture and lift, and compare how it looks against yesterday's glossy finish in the same light. It's genuinely one of the cheapest products on any drugstore shelf, and the shift in how your whole head reads can be more noticeable than a cut, a color, or a far more expensive shine serum ever managed to be. Rule 5. Quick one. The one nobody even names as a rule. This one's fast, because it's really the absence of a rule rather than a rule itself. Most of us never learned that direction matters at all when styling hair. Only that neatness does. Every one of the 4 rules above quietly assumes hair should be trained to lie exactly where it naturally wants to fall. That single unspoken assumption is the thread connecting all 4, and it's exactly what the final technique breaks completely. The buried technique, overdirection. Here's the one I promised you at the very start, the technique that pulls everything else in this video together, and the one that's almost completely vanished from how we're taught to style hair today. Back in salons of the 1960s, master stylists worked with a technique called overdirection, drying and setting hair in the opposite direction from where it naturally wants to fall, so that when it settles back into place, it lands with lift already built into the root rather than lying flat. Here's the mechanism. You don't aim hair where you want it to end up. You aim it past that point, in the wrong direction, so gravity brings it back with volume instead of pulling it down into flatness. If you want hair sitting up and back off your face, you dry it forward and down first, over-directing it, then let it fall back. The root has been lifted and trained away from the scalp, so when hair returns to its natural position, it can no longer lie flat. It rests on a cushion of lifted roots instead. That's where real, lasting, all-day volume actually comes from. Not teasing, not spray, direction. The fix, in practice, take the hair at your crown, the flattest, most scalp-revealing zone. Instead of drying it back and down, the way it naturally falls, lift that section straight up, even pulling it slightly forward toward the forehead as you dry, aiming the dryer at the root rather than the ends. Hold it in that lifted, over-directed position, then hit it with the cool shot to set it before letting it fall back naturally. Do the same at the sides. If hair falls flat at the temples, over-direct it upward and back as you dry, past where you actually want it to land, then let it settle. Do it today. Try this on just your crown section this week, before attempting your whole head, and notice how differently that one section sits once it's fallen back into place. It takes a few extra minutes, and it costs nothing at all. Why this technique disappeared in the first place. It's worth understanding why a technique this effective, and this free, isn't something most of us were ever actually taught. When precision cutting arrived and the wash-and-go era took over, product companies took over the conversation, replacing this skill-based technique with something they could sell in a bottle instead. Mousse, hairspray, and volumizing potions filled the shelves through the following decades. There was never much incentive to teach a technique a woman could use forever for free, when a can that needed replacing every month was available to sell instead. So the technique quietly faded. Many of our mothers half remembered it. Most of us never learned it at all. We were handed the bottle instead of the skill. Understanding that history doesn't just explain the past. It changes how you evaluate every new product marketed to you going forward. The question worth asking isn't just, does this work? But, is there a free technique doing the same job that nobody bothered mentioning? This isn't really an argument against products altogether. A good lightweight volumizer or a well-formulated dry shampoo genuinely helps, alongside the technique rather than instead of it. The point is simply that the technique should have come first, taught freely, with products as an optional addition on top, instead of arriving the other way around, where a whole generation was handed a shelf of bottles and never once shown the free skill sitting underneath all of them. How all 5 rules connect. Now that you've seen all 5 individually, here's what ties them together. Every single one is really the same mistake, showing up in a different part of the routine. The shortcut removes shadow. The heavy conditioner weighs down the root. Drying flat trains hair to lie in the direction that hides fullness. Chasing shine reflects light straight onto the scalp instead of scattering it. Each of these, on its own, quietly does the same thing. It reduces the shadow and increases the visible scalp. Overdirection is really the single technique that reverses all four at once, which is exactly why it was saved for the end. Once you understand shadow and root angle as the actual mechanism behind every rule on this list, you don't need to memorize 5 separate instructions anymore. You just need to ask, before doing anything to your hair, whether this choice is adding shadow at the root or removing it. And that single question is genuinely more useful long-term than any of the 5 rules individually, because it travels with you into decisions this video never covered. A new product on a shelf, a stylist suggesting a cut you haven't tried, a trend that promises volume through some entirely different method. Ask whether it adds shadow at the root or takes it away, and you'll usually know the answer before you've even finished trying it. The real secret. Here's the principle underneath all 5 of these. Every single rule we covered today asked you to add something, cover something, or cut something away. The fix, every single time, was letting your actual hair do more of the work it was always capable of doing. A shadow instead of a shine, a lifted root instead of a flat one, length instead of a cut that removes it. None of this required a single new product. It required unlearning instructions that were never really about what flattered you in the first place. You did not lose your fullness. It was styled away, one rule at a time, and today you took it back. None of what we covered requires money, a shorter cut you don't want, or thicker hair than you have. It requires only that you stop obeying rules nobody ever explained and start using the techniques that quietly got buried under decades of products sold to replace them. Think about how differently you'll stand in front of that same hallway mirror once you've actually tried even one of these 5 things tonight. The sigh that's become automatic doesn't have to stay automatic. It was never really about your age catching up with you. It was about instructions that were handed to you a long time ago by people who had very little reason to explain why they worked, because their business depended on you never asking. If this helped you look at your own hair routine differently, hit like and subscribe. I've got a lot more of this coming every week. And tell me in the comments, which of these 5 rules did you follow the longest, and which one are you letting go of